At 74 years old, I discovered that my own daughter had forged my signature to sell my oceanfront estate in Naples, the very home I bought for $2.8 million after a lifetime of work while I was lying in a hospital bed. Imagine that. A man survives heart surgery, stitches still fresh on his chest, only to wake up and realize the people he trusted most were circling like vultures, already feeding off what they thought was his carcass. My name is Raymond Aldridge, 74 years old, retired aviation executive. For 40 years, I helped build fleets of private jets that carried CEOs and presidents across the sky. I wasn't born into money. I clawed my way up from a mechanics shop in Pittsburgh to boardrooms in New York. I worked, I sacrificed, and when my wife Margaret passed 2 years ago, I thought the fortune I built would be a blessing for my family. I thought wrong. See, I believed in old values, family first, loyalty above all, and dignity in your later years. That's what I gave to my only daughter, Melissa. Boarding school in Switzerland. A wedding reception at the Breakers in Palm Beach that cost me 6 figures. A condo in Boston while she studied law. Every door I opened for her was paid for with decades of sweat. But Melissa married a man named Grant Hollister, a lawyer with an ego bigger than his bank account. He came from a family who liked to talk about old money, though every time I looked, I only saw old debts. Still, I bit my tongue. Margaret used to say, "Ray, sometimes you have to let kids make their own mistakes." So I let Melissa marry him, hoping she'd be happy. 2 months ago, I wasn't feeling well. Sharp chest pains, dizziness, the kind of warning signs a man my age can't ignore. Next thing I knew, I was in Naples Memorial Hospital, 3 stents in my heart, and a doctor telling me to take it easy. While I lay there recovering, Grant and Melissa had other plans. They thought an old man on morphine would never notice a forged signature. They thought I wouldn't recognize the neat, careful handwriting that didn't belong to me. But when I opened that certified letter from a title company congratulating me on the pending sale of my estate, the home I'd poured a fortune into, the one with Margaret's rose garden and my library overlooking the Gulf, something inside me went cold. I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I laughed. Because Melissa and Grant had just made one fatal mistake. They underestimated me. They assumed 74 meant weak, that surgery meant confused, that grief meant blind. They forgot who I was, a man who'd negotiated billion-dollar contracts, who knew the smell of fraud, the way a pilot knows jet fuel. That night, I sat in my hospital bed, staring at the papers they'd slipped under my nose. I saw the forged signature, smoother than my usual scrawl, missing the tiny loop I'd had in my R since I was 21. It wasn't mine. It was theirs, and that was the moment I knew. If they wanted war, they were about to get it. Because if you've ever been underestimated because of your age, if anyone has ever looked at your gray hair and thought it meant weakness, you'll understand what I did next. If you've ever felt betrayed by your own family, after giving them everything, stay with me, because what I uncovered will make your blood run cold. The next morning, still weak from surgery, I asked the nurse to bring me my reading glasses. I wanted to see every line of that so-called contract Melissa and Grant had slipped past me. My hands shook, not from age, but from anger, as I read the fine print. According to the paperwork, my Naples estate, valued at $2.8 million, was being sold for $1.9 million. A full $900,000 below market, and the buyer a family trust connected to one of Grant's law partners in Miami. The deposit listed was $320,000 already wired to an account I'd never seen. I pressed my thumb against the signature line. Smooth, clean ink. Not a smudge, not the jagged stroke that comes when I sign with old hands. My real signature has a crooked hook on the R from years of signing mechanics logs and contract binders, with pens running out of ink. That crooked hook wasn't there. It was perfect. Too perfect. A forgery. I set the paper down, and for a moment, despair washed over me. Was this what Margaret and I built our life for? So our only child could carve our history up like meat on a butcher's block. I thought about the nights Margaret and I walked that shoreline hand in hand, dreaming about the grandchildren who'd run across our lawn. That dream was being stolen by the very daughter Margaret had rocked to sleep. My mind flashed back to Margaret's last words before the cancer took her. She'd gripped my hand and whispered, "Ray, when you can't see the truth, clearly trust God to light your path. Don't let the shadows fool you." I leaned back against the hospital pillow, closed my eyes, and prayed. Lord, I don't know why my own flesh and blood would do this to me. But if you give me the strength, I'll find the truth. I'll protect what Margaret and I built. I won't let them take it. And I felt calm wash over me. Not the kind of calm that makes you surrender. The kind that makes you sharpen your focus. That afternoon, Melissa called. Her voice was sugar, but I knew better. "Dad, how are you feeling? I hope you're resting. Grant and I have been handling some of your affairs while you recover. Don't worry. Everything's under control." Under control. That phrase cut through me like a blade. I asked her gently, "Melissa, what kind of affairs?" She paused. "Oh, you know, bills, insurance, a few legal matters. We just want you comfortable." Comfortable. The same word she'd used when she convinced me to pay for her wedding in Palm Beach, where the flower arrangements alone had cost $45,000. The same word she used when she begged me to buy her and Grant that Mercedes convertible last year so we can drive you around in comfort, Dad. Comfortable meant controlled. Controlled meant erased. When I pressed her about the estate, she grew sharper. "Dad, you shouldn't stress yourself. You don't need that big house by the ocean anymore. You need somewhere safe. Smaller, easier." I almost laughed. Smaller, easier, cheaper, and in their names. I didn't argue. I didn't let my voice tremble. I simply told her I was too tired to talk and hung up. But in my mind, the gears were turning. This wasn't just greed. This was strategy. Melissa and Grant weren't making mistakes. They were executing a plan. A plan that required me to be silent, sick, and weak. But I wasn't silent. I wasn't sick, and I wasn't weak. I whispered to myself, "Margaret, I'll follow the light. I'll fight this." And with God as my witness, I knew I was going to turn their little game upside down. The first thing I did when I was discharged from the hospital was stop by the estate myself. I wanted to see it with my own eyes. My body was still weak, but my mind had never felt sharper. The moment I pulled into the long driveway lined with palm trees, I noticed something that nearly made my knees buckle. A real estate sign. Big, bold letters, pending sale, Hollister and Partners Realty. Grant's firm. My stomach turned. They hadn't even bothered to hide it. To them, the house was already theirs. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lilies. Not Margaret's roses, lilies. Melissa's choice. I walked through the rooms, slowly feeling like a ghost in my own life. The library where I'd spent decades studying aviation contracts had boxes stacked by the wall labeled with masking tape, "Old books, donate." My chest burned not from surgery, but from betrayal. I went to my office, the one place Melissa rarely entered. My filing cabinet had been rifled through, papers out of order, drawers half open. And sitting on top of the desk was a folder I didn't recognize, correspondence with a Miami title company. The deposit, $320,000 already transferred. The bank account listed wasn't mine. It belonged to an LLC managed by a man named Eric Dunn. A quick search on my phone told me Eric Dunn was Grant's law school buddy. I clenched my jaw. This wasn't sloppy theft. This was an operation. That evening, Melissa called again. "Dad, we've been thinking about your living situation. That house is too much for you. Too many stairs, too many repairs. We found a condo, 1 bedroom, close to a clinic. Very modern, you'll love it." I said nothing for a moment, then asked, "And what about my estate, Melissa?" Her tone shifted just a fraction. "Dad, please don't stress. We'll handle it. It's better for everyone this way." I hung up before my anger boiled over. Better for everyone. Everyone except me. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and began pulling together every scrap of financial paper I could find. My years in aviation had taught me one thing: never sign anything you can't verify. And what I was seeing here didn't add up. The wiring receipt from the title company showed a timestamp that fell during my surgery, the very hour I was unconscious under anesthesia. Yet the signature on the deposit authorization form looked flawless, steady, like it had been written by a man in perfect health, not mine. That night, I set my phone on the kitchen counter and opened the recorder app. The next time Melissa or Grant called, I'd be ready. But it wasn't Melissa who slipped first. It was Grant. He called late, his voice too smooth. "Ray, you don't need to worry about the estate paperwork. Melissa and I are making sure everything is secure. You just focus on recovering." I asked him, "Grant, what account did the deposit go into?" He stammered. "What deposit?" "The 320,000, Grant. The one that went through on July 18th at 2:47 p.m. A pause. "Then Ray, you must be mistaken. You're still on medication. Don't let your mind play tricks on you." I smiled bitterly. Classic gaslighting. But I had the receipt. That was the moment I knew they weren't just trying to sell the estate. They were setting me up. The next step would be declaring me incompetent, and once that happened, every dollar I had left would be in their hands. I picked up Margaret's Bible from the desk, the one she used to read every night. I ran my fingers over the worn leather cover. "Margaret," I whispered, "they think they've outsmarted me. But they don't know who they're dealing with." From that moment, doubt gave way to resolve. I wasn't just a sick old man recovering from surgery. I was Raymond Aldridge, and I was going to burn their little scheme to the ground. 2 nights later, I sat alone at the mahogany desk in my study. The sea breeze rolled in through the open balcony doors, carrying with it the sound of the waves. On the desk sat my phone, already recording. I'd been waiting for this moment, and when Melissa's name flashed across the screen, I let it ring twice before I answered. "Dad," she said sweetly, "how are you feeling tonight?" "Better," I told her, keeping my voice calm, "stronger every day." "That's good," she replied, but her tone was already shifting from daughterly concern to something sharper. "Listen, we need to finalize the transition. The estate is practically sold, And once it closes, you'll be able to move into the condo. It will be easier for you." I took a slow breath. "Melissa, tell me something. Who authorized the deposit?" There was silence, then a faint clearing of her throat. "Dad, you did. You just don't remember because you've been unwell." "Really?" I said softly. Funny, because at the exact time that money was wired, I was under anesthesia with 3 surgeons cutting into my chest. Hard to sign papers when you're unconscious. I could almost hear her pulse quicken through the phone. She tried to cover it with a brittle laugh. "Dad, you're confused again." That was when I dropped the bait. "Melissa, sweetheart, I don't want confusion. I want clarity. Did you move the money?" Pause. Too long. Then she snapped, her patience breaking. "We already moved the money, Dad. It's too late." I smiled, though she couldn't see it. Her words were crisp, recorded, undeniable. Too late for what I asked. "To protect you," she said quickly, trying to recover. "Grant and I were just making sure everything is safe. You don't need that burden anymore." "Burden," I repeated. "Is that what Margaret's rose garden was, a burden? Was the home library where you read as a child a burden? Was the roof over your head paid for with 40 years of my life a burden?" Her voice hardened. "Dad, you don't understand. You can't live alone anymore. You're not capable of handling these decisions." I let the silence hang, then said slowly, "Melissa, I'm recording this call." She gasped audibly. "What?" "Everything you've just admitted," I said. "The deposit, the forgery, the plan to move me into some box of a condo so you could gut my estate. It's all recorded." Her tone flipped in an instant, scrambling back to sweetness. "Dad, please, I didn't mean it that way. You're misinterpreting." "No," I cut in. "For once, Melissa, I'm not the one misinterpreting. I'm the one listening. And now the whole world will listen too." There was nothing but dead air on the line for several long seconds. Then she whispered, "If you do this, you'll destroy me." I looked out at the horizon, the Gulf of Mexico stretching wide and endless. "No, Melissa," I said quietly. "You destroyed yourself the moment you decided your father's trust was worth less than his money." I ended the call and placed the phone gently on the desk. The recording timer glowed red, 18 minutes 43 seconds. Long enough to ruin both Melissa and Grant's carefully laid plans. I leaned back in my chair, feeling both the ache of betrayal and the fire of vindication. They thought I was an old man with a weak heart and cloudy memory. They were about to learn I had more clarity and fight than they'd ever imagined. Type 1 in the comments if you're still with me, because this is the moment everything began to unravel. The very next morning, I drove into downtown Naples with the recording still fresh on my phone. My chest was tight from the strain, but I wasn't about to let a stent or a scar stop me. I had spent my life signing contracts worth millions, and now I was about to undo the most important one yet. The marble lobby of Gulf Coast Bank and Trust gleamed under the morning sun. Behind the front desk, the receptionist smiled politely. "Good morning, sir. How may we help you?" "I need to see Charlotte Green," I said. "Now." Within minutes, Charlotte, the bank's vice president, a woman I'd known since she was a young loan officer, appeared at the door. She hurried me into her office, her brow furrowed. "Raymond, you don't look well." "What's going on?" I set the contract on her desk and tapped the signature line. "This is supposed to be mine." "It isn't." Charlotte pulled out a magnifying glass, comparing it with the signature card she had on file from decades of transactions. She didn't even need 10 seconds. This isn't yours. Too smooth. Too perfect. Melissa and her husband, I said flatly. They're selling my estate under my nose. Her jaw tightened. That's forgery. Bank fraud too if they've moved money through one of our accounts. I slid my phone across her desk and hit play. Melissa's voice filled the room. We already moved the money, Dad. It's too late. Charlotte's eyes widened. She paused the recording. Raymond, this is damning. Then stop the sale, I said. Freeze every dollar connected to this deal. If you need my authorization, you have it in writing in blood however you like. Charlotte leaned forward. We'll put a hold on the $320,000 deposit immediately. I'll also flag any future attempts on your accounts. But Raymond, you should know, this won't stop them from trying again. I nodded. That's fine. Let them try. I'll be ready. From the bank, I drove straight to the Collier County Real Estate Association. My knees ached as I walked the long hall to the licensing board, but fire carried me forward. I met with the chair a sharp-eyed woman named Diana Lopez. Mr. Aldridge, she greeted me warmly, what brings you here today? I dropped the forged contract and deposit record onto her desk. Fraud. And I want it stopped before my estate disappears into the Gulf with a fake signature. She scanned the documents quickly. Hollister and Partners Realty. I know this firm. If this checks out. She shook her head. They could lose their license for this. I looked her straight in the eye. Make sure they do. My daughter and her husband think an old man can't fight back. I intend to prove them wrong. By noon, I'd made 3 more stops. My attorney, the county clerk's office, and the title company itself. Everywhere I went, I left behind copies of the forged paperwork, the recording, and a written affidavit. I wanted a paper trail so thick they could never dig out from under it. Back at home, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by stacks of manila folders, aviation contracts, old tax records, estate documents. I wasn't just fighting for my house, I was building a case. 40 years of running companies had taught me one truth: preparation wins wars. That evening, the phone started ringing. Not Melissa's number, not Grant's, but vendors, the title company, the Realtors Association, even a partner from Grant's own law firm. Each call had the same edge of panic. Mr. Aldridge, we've been informed of irregularities. I gave the same calm reply every time. Yes, and if you don't want to be complicit in fraud, you'll act accordingly. I'll see you in court otherwise. By the time the sun set, the ground beneath Melissa and Grant's plan was already crumbling. They thought they could push me quietly into a corner. Instead, I'd turned the lights on. They wanted control. I was taking it back. And this was only the beginning. That night, after a day spent dragging their fraud into the sunlight, I sat alone in the library of my estate. The room was dim except for a brass lamp on the desk, its glow falling across stacks of papers, contracts, and affidavits I'd collected. Outside, the Gulf waves struck the shore with their steady rhythm. I should have felt exhausted. My body was still weak from surgery, my hands still stiff from signing affidavit after affidavit. But what I felt instead was clarity sharper than I'd known in years. I reached up to the top shelf and pulled down Margaret's Bible. The leather was cracked, the pages soft from her touch. I hadn't opened it in weeks. I placed it on the desk, the scent of old paper rising like a memory, and let it fall open where it would. The words stared back at me. And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. Margaret's voice came back to me gentle but firm, the way she used to speak when she thought I was losing my way. Ray, God's light doesn't just expose lies, it gives you the courage to face them. For a long moment, I let those words settle into my bones. I wasn't just fighting for money or for a house. I was fighting for dignity, for the right to finish my life on my own terms. Melissa and Grant had forgotten that. They thought faith made a man weak. But the truth was, it made me unbreakable. I whispered into the empty room, "Margaret, I hear you. And Lord, I hear you too. Give me the strength to see this through." The plan came to me as clear as day. Quiet battles weren't enough. Phone calls and affidavits weren't enough. If I wanted to make sure no one could question my mind, my memory, or my judgment, I had to go public. And there was only one place to do it, the Naples Merchant Association's monthly gathering. Every banker, realtor, attorney, and business owner worth their salt would be there. The same people Melissa and Grant hoped would believe their version of me, the frail, confused old man. I would show them the truth, with my own words, my own evidence. The more I thought about it, the calmer I became. Not the calm of surrender, but the calm before a storm. I picked up my pen and began to prepare. I organized the evidence into color-coded folders, red for forgery documents, the fraudulent signatures, blue for financial records, the wired deposit, green for recorded conversations, proof of Melissa's own words, yellow for witness statements, Charlotte at the bank, Diana from the realtors board. When I finished, the stack was taller than a phone book. A lifetime of contracts had taught me one thing: paper doesn't lie, even when people do. As I placed Margaret's Bible on top of the folders, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Peace. This wasn't just revenge. It was a reckoning. I turned off the lamp, the room plunging into shadow except for the faint moonlight at the window. Before I left the desk, I laid my hand on the Bible and whispered, "Lord, let the truth speak louder than their lies." And in that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do. Melissa and Grant thought they were playing a private game of deceit. They had no idea the entire community was about to hear the truth directly from me. The following Thursday night, the ballroom of the Naples Grand Hotel was lit up like a chandelier. The Naples Merchant Association was holding its monthly gathering, and nearly every influential name in the city was present. Bankers, realtors, lawyers, developers, even a few city commissioners. The kind of people Melissa and Grant had always wanted to impress. I arrived in a charcoal suit that still fit me, though a little looser around the waist since surgery. My folders were stacked neatly in a leather briefcase, and under my arm I carried Margaret's Bible. I wasn't there just to protect my estate. I was there to reclaim my dignity. When I walked through the lobby, a few familiar faces nodded respectfully. I'd been a member of this association for 30 years back when I was still flying around the country, closing aviation contracts. They remembered me as sharp, tough, unshakable. That's exactly what I intended to remind them of tonight. At 7:45 p.m., the president of the association, Robert Kingsley, tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have an important matter on the agenda tonight. Longtime member Mr. Raymond Aldridge has requested 15 minutes to address us about an issue of elder financial abuse in our community." "Mr. Aldridge, the floor is yours." I walked to the front, the briefcase in my hand heavier than its weight. My legs ached, but my voice did not tremble as I adjusted the microphone. Thank you, Robert. Friends, colleagues. Tonight I am not here as a retired executive. I'm here as a father. A father who trusted his only daughter and her husband and nearly lost everything. The room quieted instantly. I opened the briefcase and pulled out a folder. 2 months ago, while I was recovering from heart surgery, my daughter Melissa Aldridge and her husband attorney Grant Hollister forged my signature to sell my Naples oceanfront estate valued at $2.8 million for just $1.9 million. They wired a $320,000 deposit into an account belonging to one of Grant's associates. I held up the contract and let the crowd see the signature. This is not mine. Compare it with the one on file at Gulf Coast Bank. Charlotte Green, the vice president, confirmed it doesn't match. Too smooth. Too perfect. Not the hand of a 74-year-old man with tremors after surgery. I clicked a small speaker on the podium and pressed play on my phone. Melissa's voice filled the room. We already moved the money, Dad. It's too late. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I let the words hang, then stopped the recording. That's my daughter, admitting to theft. At the back of the room, I saw Melissa and Grant. Melissa's face was pale, Grant's jaw clenched. They hadn't expected me to drag this fight into the open. But it didn't stop there, I continued. When I confronted them, they told me I was confused, that I was too old to make decisions, that I needed to be placed in a condo near a clinic, stripped of my independence. I picked up Margaret's Bible, holding it high. My wife always told me, the truth will set you free. And the truth is, right here in these folders, recordings, contracts, bank records, affidavits, proof that my own family conspired to erase me while I was still alive. Hands shot up in the crowd. Whispers turned to murmurs. Someone said out loud, "That's criminal." I gestured to the audience. "Charlotte, would you stand, please?" Charlotte Green rose from her chair. "I can confirm Mr. Aldridge's account," she said firmly. "The signature on that contract is forged. We froze the deposit as soon as the evidence came to light. Next, I called on Dr. Howard Bennett, my physician of 15 years. He stood adjusting his glasses. I examined Mr. Aldridge just 6 weeks ago. Cognitive tests, memory, reasoning, all perfect. He is fully competent." The room erupted again. The foundation of Melissa and Grant's story that I was senile confused was collapsing in real time. I leaned into the microphone. Melissa and Grant planned to steal what I spent a lifetime building. But tonight I want you all to know elder financial abuse doesn't just happen to strangers in nursing homes. It happens to people like me, to people you know, to people you trust. I turned and looked directly at my daughter. It happens when blood decides inheritance should come before respect, when greed drowns out love, and when children forget who gave them everything they have. Melissa stood abruptly. "This is slander," she shouted, her voice shrill. "My father is delusional." Before I could respond, Sheriff Alan Pierce, who had been sitting near the side wall, spoke up. "Ma'am, you need to sit down. You're already under investigation. If you continue, you'll make things worse for yourself." The room fell silent again. Every eye turned back to me. I closed the folder, slid Margaret's Bible on top, and said simply, "I'm not here to humiliate my family. I'm here to protect myself and to remind every one of you, do not mistake age for weakness. You may see gray hair and scars, but behind them is a lifetime of wisdom. and wisdom will always outlast deceit. When I stepped down from the podium, the room erupted not in whispers this time, but in applause. Not just for me, but for the truth. Melissa and Grant slipped out through the back door, faces ashen. Their empire of lies had just crumbled in front of the very people whose approval they craved most, and I, for the first time in months, felt lighter than air. The morning after the Merchant Association meeting, my phone rang before sunrise. It was District Attorney Clara Martinez, a woman with a reputation for chewing up fraud cases and spitting out convictions. "Mr. Aldridge," she said briskly, "I was at the gathering last night. Half the room has already called my office. I'd like you to come in today with your documentation." By 9 a.m., I was seated across from her in a downtown office that smelled faintly of coffee and paper. I placed my leather briefcase on her desk, opened it, and began laying out folders like a general unrolling battle plans. Red for forgery, I explained blue for financial records, green for recordings, yellow for witness statements. Everything cross-referenced, every page notarized. Clara raised her eyebrows. "Mr. Aldridge, this is more organized than half the cases my assistants prepare." I leaned forward. 40 years in aviation taught me that details save lives and fortunes. My daughter thought my age made me sloppy. Turns out it made me thorough. She smiled thinly and began leafing through the evidence. When Melissa's recorded words filled the room, "We already moved the money, Dad. It's too late." Clara set her pen down and shook her head. "This isn't just circumstantial. It's direct admission," she said. "Between the forged signature, the wire transfer, and the recordings, I can bring charges of forgery, conspiracy, attempted grand theft, and elder financial abuse. Grant will face additional charges for misuse of his law license." For the next 2 hours, we worked through the details. Clara called in her deputy and instructed him to begin drafting subpoenas for the title company, the Miami bank account, and Hollister and Partners Realty. She wanted a complete money trail from start to finish. When I left her office, the weight I'd been carrying for weeks began to ease. Justice had wheels now, and they were turning. 2 weeks later, the knock on Melissa and Grant's door came just as the sun set over Naples Bay. Sheriff Alan Pierce himself led the team. I wasn't there, I didn't need to be, but word spread fast in a town like ours. Neighbors watched from porches as Melissa, once the picture of country club elegance, was led out in handcuffs. Grant followed, his expensive suit wrinkled, his face red with rage. By the next morning, the Naples Daily News ran the headline, "Prominent attorney wife arrested in elder fraud case." The article spared no detail: forged signatures, fraudulent contracts, attempted theft of a $2.8 million estate. My name was cleared in bold print, victim described as mentally sharp, financially competent, and in full control of his affairs. The fallout came swiftly. Grant's law firm released a statement cutting ties with him. His license was suspended pending review, though everyone knew disbarment was inevitable. Melissa, once a fixture at charity luncheons, found herself disinvited from every circle that had once courted her. But it didn't stop there. At the arraignment, Clara Martinez stood tall, reading off the charges, in a voice that carried across the courtroom. Melissa Aldridge charged with 2 counts of forgery, 1 count conspiracy to commit theft, and 1 count elder financial abuse. Grant Hollister charged with forgery, conspiracy, wire fraud, and professional misconduct under the Florida Bar Association. The judge ordered bail, but the damage was done. Reporters swarmed them as they left the courthouse, microphones thrust in their faces. Melissa tried to cover herself with a scarf, but the cameras captured every tear-streaked moment. A month later, during the preliminary hearings, Clara invited me to take the stand, briefly, not to testify at length, but to show the court I was lucid. I walked slowly, my heart still tender from surgery, but my voice carried strong. "I am 74 years old," I said into the microphone, "and I am perfectly capable of managing my own life. My daughter and her husband tried to erase me before my time. But I am not erased. I am standing." The judge nodded, the jury whispered, and I caught Clara's satisfied smile from the corner of my eye. By the time the hearings concluded, Melissa and Grant's world had collapsed. They had to forfeit assets to cover restitution, the Mercedes convertible I'd bought them, Grant's boat, even their condo. Melissa's name was struck from my estate documents permanently. And the final blow. Clara confirmed that under Florida's elder abuse statutes, any heir convicted of defrauding their parent forfeits inheritance rights. Melissa would never see a dime from me again. That night, I sat in the quiet of my library, Margaret's Bible open on the desk. Justice had come not as fast as revenge, but stronger, deeper, permanent. I whispered into the silence, "Margaret, it's done. They can't touch us now." But deep inside, I knew this story wasn't finished yet. Because justice in the courtroom was one thing. Justice in the heart was another. And the hardest part wasn't seeing my daughter in handcuffs. It was realizing she'd put herself there. 6 months had passed since that night in the Merchant Association ballroom. The Florida sun had moved through another season, and the estate, my estate, stood untouched, as if it had been waiting for me all along. The legal battles had wound their way through the courts, leaving Melissa and Grant bankrupt in reputation and pocket. Grant lost his law license permanently. Melissa faced community service and restitution orders that stripped away the luxury she had once flaunted. The whispers around Naples no longer spoke of her charity luncheons or designer gowns, but of her greed and her downfall. As for me, I walked the marble floors of the estate with renewed pride. The rose garden Margaret planted bloomed brighter than it had in years, as if the earth itself was celebrating. The library, once nearly boxed up for donation, was now my sanctuary. Each night I sat beneath its shelves, Margaret's Bible at my side, and felt her presence in the silence. I made one more decision, perhaps the most important of all. The day after the trial ended, I called Clara Martinez, the district attorney, and asked her to connect me with a trust attorney she trusted. When we met, I brought the old will, the one that named Melissa as sole heir, and placed it flat on the desk. "Burn it," I said. Instead, we drafted a new plan. The Aldridge Aviation Fund, a scholarship foundation for young mechanics and engineers who couldn't afford the education Melissa had wasted. I wanted my money to lift people who would build, not destroy. Blood may have betrayed me, I told the attorney, but maybe the next generation of strivers will honor what Margaret and I stood for. Word of the scholarship spread quickly. Letters began arriving, scrawled in the shaky handwriting of students who worked nights in hangars and days in classrooms. One young man, Daniel Cortez, wrote, "Sir, I never met you, but I promise you this: if you invest in me, I'll never let you down. You've already given me hope, just by showing people like me matter." Those words cut deeper than Melissa's betrayals ever had. They healed. I found myself smiling more. The pain of losing my daughter hadn't disappeared, Betrayal never fully fades, but it softened, replaced by something else, purpose. One quiet Sunday morning, I sat on the veranda overlooking the Gulf, a glass of iced tea in my hand, Margaret's Bible on the table. The horizon shimmered with light, and I realized something profound. Justice in the courtroom had been satisfying. Watching Melissa and Grant fall under the weight of their own greed had been cathartic. But true victory that came in the silence after, when I chose what to build from the ruins. I wasn't just protecting my wealth anymore. I was reclaiming my legacy. A legacy not of mansions and yachts, though I still had those, but of integrity. Of refusing to bow, even at 74, to the lie that age equals weakness. That evening, I walked through the house and paused at a framed photograph of Melissa as a child, grinning with a gap in her teeth, holding a model airplane I'd bought her. For a moment, grief tugged at me, but I whispered, "I raised you better. You chose differently." Then I turned away, closed the door, and stepped back into the present, into the life Margaret and I had built, now secure again. The estate was mine. My dignity was mine. And most importantly, my future was mine. And I knew this truth with every beat of my stubborn, patched-up heart. They had tried to erase me, but I was still here, and I was not finished. The night after the scholarship fund was announced, I sat alone on the veranda of my Naples estate. The waves rolled steady under the moonlight, and for the first time in many months I felt something I thought I'd lost forever: peace. I had walked through fire. My own daughter and her husband had forged my name, stolen my trust, and tried to put me in a cage of lies. They thought age made me blind, that grief made me weak, that a tired heart made me easy prey. But here I was, 74 years old, watching the Gulf shimmer in silver light, and I was free. I placed Margaret's Bible on my lap, the same one I had carried into the Merchant Association hall, the same one I leaned on in the darkest nights. My fingers found the page she had marked years ago. "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear?" Those words struck me differently now. I had feared my own family, feared betrayal, feared being erased. Yet in the end, it wasn't fear that carried me through. It was faith. Faith that truth would rise. Faith that God had not abandoned me even when my daughter had. Faith that what was stolen in the dark would be restored in the light. The estate was still mine. My dignity was intact. But more than that, my future had been rewritten. Not by Melissa, not by Grant, not by their lawyers or their false signatures. By me. And here is what I want you to hear. If you've stayed with me this far, blood alone doesn't make a family. Respect does. Loyalty does. Faith does. I once believed inheritance was about passing money down. Now I know it's about passing down honor, truth, and the courage to stand tall even when those closest to you try to cut you down. I've chosen to leave my fortune not to those who betrayed me, but to those who will honor it, young dreamers who remind me of the man I once was working in a hangar with grease under my nails, hungry for a chance. That is the family I choose now. And Melissa, I pray for her. I do. Because faith tells me bitterness poisons only the one who drinks it. She may never understand what she threw away, but I refuse to let her betrayal chain me to anger for the rest of my days. I lift my eyes to the horizon and whisper, "Thank you, Lord. Thank you for truth. Thank you for strength. Thank you for letting me keep my dignity." To anyone listening, I'll tell you this: don't let anyone, not even your own blood, convince you that age makes you worthless. Don't let them decide your fate with forged papers or poisoned words. You are more powerful than you think, and the years behind you are not weakness, they are armor. If you believe dignity and truth matter more than blood, then stand with me. Subscribe, share this story, and remind the world that age is not a sentence, it is a crown. Because in the end, Melissa and Grant lost far more than money. They lost me. And I gained something far greater than their approval, freedom, peace, and the unshakable knowledge that God had the final word all along. And that, my friends, is the only inheritance that truly matters.